What an upsetting task you have had to put this together. I was listening to the former Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, in the House of Commons a little earlier, who commissioned this report based originally on 23 cases. He said what has been discovered during the course of this has been beyond his darkest fears. Talk to me about what you have uncovered and the scale of it all.
So, as far as we're aware, this is the largest inquiry into a single service in the history of the NHS. Throughout the process, I've been supported by an amazing multi-professional team of just over 90 midwives and doctors, all with decades of experience. We did start with a caseload of 23 families. When we first reviewed those 23 cases, we were of the unanimous view that these were amongst the most serious cases that we had seen in our careers. But of course, once the news got out into the local system here in Shropshire that there was this independent Secretary of State review, the families just kept coming. We got to 60, we got to 100, we got to 300, and then the numbers kept climbing. So what we've described today are the reviews, 1,592 clinical incident reviews undertaken by my expert independent team.
It's hard for those numbers to sink in. As we said, it started with 23, and so many families drawn into this, finding out about each other, because I would imagine when this happens to you as a family, you hope that you are the only ones. But as you said, as this came out, it was uncovered that this went on over 2 decades at Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital Trust. Repeated failures. What are the reasons behind the repeated failures?
So I think there are a range of reasons. First of all, this was a trust that did not investigate properly. We know that systems and structures of governance, clinical governance and investigation has changed in our NHS over time, and we were careful to only ever judge the trust against the accepted standards of the time. But each time we did that, we still found significant failings to investigate, failures to listen to families, and failure to learn. We came across action plans that, even when they were of a reasonable quality, and that wasn't often, action plans that were simply put on a shelf. And one of the things that my team found most distressing is that when they were reviewing cases, down the years, down the line, they kept finding the same themes over and over again. So my expert team of midwives and doctors have said to me, they've used words like harrowing and distressing to describe the work that they've needed to do on behalf of the families in Shropshire.
In this report, you don't talk about recommendations, because whenever we hear about a report that's been commissioned into a scandal, it talks about recommendations. You're very specific in that you talk about essential and immediate actions. Reading between the lines, you're basically saying this is so bad, this must not be the end of the matter. These changes have to be made.
So there's no reading between the lines at all. We don't read between the lines in our review team. We say it how it is. These are, you're absolutely right, immediate and essential actions, or IEAs for short, if you prefer. The Trust has got more than 60 local actions for learning, and my team and I have an absolute expectation that these are delivered upon. Now, that needs some system changes. The government has announced a significant amount of funding into maternity services since Report 1 was published, and further funding again before Report 2, so that was last week. But we endorsed the findings of the Health Select Committee, led by Jeremy Hunt last year, that said much more funding needed to be provided. And so we are saying to the government that that finding from the Health Select Committee must now happen. There's other immediate actions around training, around learning from situations when mothers lose their lives. Trusts have got to come together if they've all delivered care. And, you know, there is just an awful lot to do. However, we are confident that the system, the wider system, from government down to local regions, down to trust boards and wards, do understand the scale of the issue, and we will be watching carefully to make sure that this does happen.
Yeah, the Trust have apologised today, and they have said that they have already started work to make changes. You mentioned those 60 specific actions for that particular Trust and 15 immediate and essential actions for all maternity services in England. Are we looking at a national crisis? And are you worried that services won't be safe unless you get the level of funding you've been talking about there, which the government haven't committed to those levels of spending in this area?
So I think the very positive thing that has come out of what happened to so many Shropshire families is that the level of scrutiny and attention on maternity services is something that I've not seen in my 30-year career. So it can feel difficult when there's a harsh spotlight on a particular service, but I think much positivity will come out of that. I heard the Secretary of State stand up today to say that he was accepting and endorsing all of our immediate and essential actions. That does mean increased funding for workforce. That does mean better standards, seamless standards of training across England. There is a lot to do, but I am confident that the attention on maternity services is such that this will now happen and happen at pace.
Yeah, you had the Health Secretary's support. He just needs the backing of the Treasury for funds. Talk to me about the families involved. I'm sure you'd like to pay tribute to them today, because we're talking about mothers who have campaigned for years to get to this point, and at many points in the process, I'm sure felt like they were a lone voice in the wind, I think is how I've heard one family put it. Can you pay tribute to them today? Because they're the ones that have got you to this point, and I'm sure they won't let it up.
Absolutely. The first thing that I did this morning as I launched this report was to pay tribute to the families. They were silenced for far too long, and many families, the quote about being a lone voice in the wind came from the mummy of Olivia. Olivia died in 2002, and her mum appeared on television in 2006 to try and get someone to do something. It took the heroic efforts of Richard and Rhiannon Stanton-Davis and Kayleigh and Colin Griffiths after the deaths of their babies Kate in 2009 and Pippa in 2016 to get Jeremy Hunt, who was then Secretary of State for Health, to agree to this review. The cohort of families are known as the Secretary of State 23, the original 23. And they were made up of families who had tried to get their voices heard for so long. Of course, once the news was out there that this review had started, the numbers continued to increase to where we got to today. And families have tried so hard. They described to me being exhausted by their efforts to try to get their voices heard. But they have done it, we have done it, and now what we have, thanks to those families and my amazing review team, is a blueprint, a safe road forward for maternity services across England.
Yeah, here's hoping that from this point on, families' voices are heard and it leads to safer care nationwide. Senior midwife Donna Ockenden, thank you so much for talking to us